All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about a philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein. And this guy, well, he was easily one of the strangest and, you could argue, one of the most important thinkers of the entire 20th century. He lived this life that was just bizarre. But the core idea behind all his work, it's one of the most practical things you'll ever come across. This quote right here is the heart of it all. And look, this isn't just some pretty poetic metaphor. Wittgenstein meant this literally. It's a claim about how our experience of reality is actually built. And once we unpack it, I think you'll see exactly how it plays out in your own life.
To really get his ideas, you kind of have to understand the man himself. Wittgenstein was born into one of the wealthiest families in all of Europe. And what did he do with that money? He gave his entire inheritance away. All of it. He was convinced it was poison for the soul.
And that's not even the half of it. I mean, this guy was a famous professor at Cambridge University, but he also worked as a schoolteacher in a tiny rural village, a hospital porter during World War II, and, yep, a gardener at a monastery. He was constantly telling his philosophy students to just quit and go do something useful with their lives.
But here's the most fascinating part of his whole story, his intellectual journey. He wrote two major philosophical books that completely changed the field. And here's the kicker. The second book almost totally contradicts the first one. So yeah, we're going to have to unpack both of them.
So let's start with his first masterpiece. It's a book he literally wrote while he was a soldier in the trenches of World War I. And with it, he tried to solve all the problems of philosophy in one fell swoop.
So this slide basically gives us our roadmap. You've got his early work, the Tractatus, which presents language as a kind of picture of reality. Then years later, you get his philosophical investigations, where he sees language more as a collection of different games. Two radically different views from the exact same brilliant mind. So the central idea of the Tractatus is that meaningful statements work just like pictures. They have to map onto facts out there in the world. A sentence is only meaningful if it can be proven true or false, if it actually corresponds to something we can observe.
And this is the famous and often misunderstood last line of the book. Now, he wasn't just dismissing the big stuff, like ethics or beauty or the meaning of life. He was saying that language, with its job of picturing facts, simply can't grasp those things. They're beyond what can be said. They can only be shown.
So why should any of this matter to us? Well, think about that frustration you feel when you're trying to put into words what love really feels like, or what justice truly is. That feeling of language just failing you? Wittgenstein says that's not a personal failure, it's a fundamental limit of language itself.
But then, Wittgenstein spent decades thinking, and he came to realize he'd gotten it wrong. He completely abandoned his picture theory for something way more flexible and, I think, a whole lot more useful. So let's dive into his next big idea.
He came up with this brilliant concept he called language games. He argued that language doesn't have just one single job. Instead, think of it like a collection of different activities, or games, and every single game has its own distinct set of rules. For example, the language game of science demands evidence and testable facts. But the language of love, well, words like I love you aren't factual reports, right? They're commitments, they're expressions. The language of law is different again. You get into real trouble when you start using the rules of one game in another. It's like trying to play chess using the rules of football.
So the crucial point is this. The meaning of a word isn't its dictionary definition. No, it's how that word gets used in a particular language game. So the right question isn't, what does this word really mean? The better question is, okay, in this context, how is this word being used?
And this right here is where it gets incredibly practical. Because the language you have available to you isn't just describing your world, it's actively shaping what you can see, what you can think, and what you can feel.
So ask yourself this question. What language games are you playing without even realizing it? And how might those games be limiting the solutions and possibilities that are even available to you?
So let's look at three very real ways you can use Wittgenstein's insights to reshape your world, starting with your own inner life.
For instance, if the only word you have for a complex negative feeling is depressed, you're kind of stuck. But what if you could learn to tell the difference between feeling grief or exhaustion or melancholy or maybe a sense of meaninglessness? Suddenly, you have more tools. You have more freedom to address what's actually going on inside.
Okay, now let's talk about arguments.
Have you ever been stuck in an argument with someone about what respect or fairness really means? Well, here's the secret. Most of the time, you're not actually arguing about facts. You're just playing two different language games with the exact same word. The solution isn't to decide who's right, but to ask, wait a minute, when you use that word, what do you mean? What game are you playing?
And this one might be the most powerful of all. The story you tell about yourself, I'm not creative, or I always fail at relationships, that's a language game. It has its own rules about what evidence you pay attention to and what you ignore. Recognizing it as just a game is the first step to realizing that other games and other stories are possible.
So, what do we take from all this? Whether you prefer the early Wittgenstein or the later Wittgenstein, the central insight is pretty much the same.
Language is not a transparent window that just gives you a crystal clear view of reality. It's a tool that you use to build your reality. It actually sets the rules for what can be seen, what can be said, and even what can be thought. Which means that when you expand your language, by learning new words, by questioning your old narratives, by understanding different language games, you are literally expanding your world. You are creating brand new possibilities for your own experience.
So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. The stories you tell yourself and the words you use, that's just one set of games. What other games are out there? What other worlds could you build?